I'm RYZEN, and these are the headlines this hour. As Russian troops advance on Kiev, President Volodymyr Zelensky takes to the streets of the capital to insist his government will not be going anywhere.
Our troops are here, citizens are here. All of us are here protecting the independence of our country, and it will continue to be this way.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says he's willing to send a delegation to Minsk for negotiations, but only if Ukraine demilitarizes. The EU puts President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on its sanctions list, but holds off from including the SWIFT banking payment system. Despite hundreds of arrests across Russia on Thursday in St. Petersburg, protesters once again took to the streets. Welcome to the programme. The battle for Kiev is underway as Ukraine continues its fight for survival on the second day of Russia's military invasion. After taking the Chernobyl exclusion zone to the north on Thursday, Russian forces have swept down towards the capital. Fierce street-to-street firefights have erupted in the city as Ukrainian defenders try to repel the attack. Across the country, Russia has mounted further military operations in an effort to take another major urban areas. Civilian casualties continue to rise. President Volodymyr Zelensky has been out on the streets of Kiev tonight to send this message to Ukrainian people and Russia.
Our troops are here, citizens are here. All of us are here protecting the independence of our country, and it will continue to be this way. Glory to our defenders, glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes.
The Kremlin says it's analysing a request by the Ukrainian president to hold talks. Ukraine's leader said he would be willing to discuss a non-aligned status for his country, preventing Kiev from joining NATO. However, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has called on Ukraine's armed forces to overthrow the current regime.
Once again, I appeal to the servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine. Do not allow neo-Nazis and Bandera to use your children, your wives and elderly as human shields. Take power into your own hands. It seems that it will be easier for us to come to an agreement than it will be to come to an agreement with this gang of drug addicts and neo-Nazis who settled in Kiev and took the entire Ukrainian people hostage.
Well, for more on the situation in Kiev, we can now join Sasha Vakulina, who's currently sheltering for safety. Sasha, we know that these are very, hard times for you, the fact that you are sheltering. So thank you so much, of course, for being back with us on Euronews tonight. Now, we know that President Zelensky has, of course, taken to the streets to stir up the support of his people. Has that reassured them in any way?
It definitely has. That was a very strong message by Ukrainian president. He was not alone. He was joined by his top team. He said, we are here. We are in Kiev. We're in the streets of Kiev, and we are not going anywhere. That was a very important message as well, because there were rumors today, during the day, that Zelensky might not be in Kiev. And he just needed to do that also to say that was not true and to confirm that he is, and he's not going to go anywhere, and to say how defiant and how resistant the people are, and he's there to support them.
And Sasha, what is the Ukrainian media then saying about this current situation and, of course, the foreign response?
Ukrainian media are really in line with Ukrainian officials. It's fair to say that. They are also calling on all the Western allies and all the partners of Ukraine to toughen up the sanctions, to do more, to help more, and also not only the sanctions. This is very important here. There are calls from Ukrainian officials to help with weapons, to help with air defense systems. And Ukrainian media, they're covering the situation in very tough conditions, of course, because the offensive operation is on. I'm not sure if you can hear now, but I can clearly hear the explosions. I am currently in Kiev, and we can hear them during the day all the time, and the sirens going off. So that's the spirit. And for the allies, do toughen up the sanctions and do help more with weapons and the air defense systems.
Well, whether or not, this extra and further support from the international community does come, we're learning that, adult men between 18 and 60 years old who have had basic military training, well, they're being banned from leaving Ukraine. What more can you tell us about that?
Definitely, this is part of the martial law that was introduced yesterday morning in the very first hours and minutes of Russian invasion, in the very early hours of this war that Russia proclaimed for Ukraine. And the men really cannot leave the country nowadays. They're banned from doing so. They're invited to come and help defend their country, to protect the country, to protect their families, their wives, their mothers, their children. And I have to tell you that not so many men are leaving. So many across the country are signing up as volunteers to do so. And
OK, Sasha Vakulina, thank you so much for being, of course, back with us on the programme, and do stay safe. Thank you so much. EU foreign ministers have met in Brussels to pass another raft of sanctions on Russia. Now, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine on Thursday, the bloc proposed punitive measures against Moscow. The sanctions target Russia's energy, financial and aviation industries. The EU's Foreign Affairs Minister, Joseph Borrell, said they have also approved the freezing of assets owned by Russian President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov.
As you know, in a sign of immediate support for Ukraine, we have adopted a sanctions package which was agreed last night by the leaders of the member states. You know that the European Council provides political guidance in order for the Council of the Foreign Affairs Ministers of the European states approve formally and put that into actions. We have listed today President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov.
Well, let's now cross over to Shona Murray in Brussels for more on that. Shona, thanks for being on the programme. Good to see you as always. So Joseph Borrell, he says that the sanctions package is strong. Putin and Lavrov are on it, but still no SWIFT payment system?
Yeah, that's right. And there was a strong expectation. We spoke about it a couple of hours ago that the SWIFT payment system would be on the sanctions list. There was hope that there was unanimity on that. It requires unanimity. That wasn't able to happen this time round. Joseph Borrell said it's still on the table for perhaps a third round of sanctions. But it's very disappointing, I think, for many people who felt that this set of sanctions, although they are far-reaching and they're the largest set of sanctions that the EU has ever implemented, they seem to have fallen flat and they seem to have disappointed. We heard commentary from the likes of Donald Tusk, the former president of the European Council, who said the countries that were against putting SWIFT on the set of sanctions, that they had disgraced themselves. But yeah, you're right, SWIFT not on the list, but Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov are.
So a little bit of disappointment there that SWIFT hasn't made the sanctions list. Now, the EU, it's told Ukraine that it's not alone. We've seen, of course, these financial sanctions. But the Ukrainian President Zelensky says more help is needed. So how far do you think Brussels could go? Could SWIFT actually make it onto that sanctions list eventually? And when and why?
Yeah, I mean, unanimity is the problem here because countries, Germany, Italy, Hungary, don't want to have it so far. But Joseph Borrell did hold out hope that eventually could get on it for the next round. The question is, what does Putin have to do to get a third round of sanctions, to get the SWIFT financial transactions on the list? That's a huge question. We know tonight at the UN Security Council, France is putting forward a resolution condemning Russia for the violence. Obviously, Russia will veto that, but it's hoped that the rest of the General Assembly will vote in favour of condemning Russia because the EU, again, is not a military organisation. It's an organisation of 27 member states. The tools that they have is sanctions, and so that's really as far as it can go.
All right, Shona Murray, thank you so much for that update from Brussels. Thank you so much. Now, staying with Brussels, NATO will send more troops to the borders of Eastern Europe. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said following a special leaders' summit to discuss Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The move comes after Poland called the alliance's forces in the east to be boosted. Together with Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, Poland requested the emergency meeting to discuss Article 4, which covers the security of any parties of the alliance that is threatened. And Stoltenberg says that the alliance has already strengthened its defence.
We are deploying elements of the NATO response force on land, at sea and in the air to further strengthen our posture and to respond quickly to any contingency. The United States, Canada, and European allies have deployed thousands of more troops to the eastern part of the alliance. We have over 100 jets at high alert operating in over 30 different locations, and over 120 ships from the high north to the Mediterranean, including 3 strike carrier groups.
Well, for more on that special NATO Leaders Summit, we now go to Brussels and Effie Kutzer-Koster. Effie, good to see you. So we heard from Jens Stoltenberg. What more can you tell us about what he said and what he says NATO will do?
Yes, exactly. Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, spoke with very strong words today as following the NATO leaders meeting together with Sweden and Finland and the heads of the EU Commission and the EU Council. And what is significant here is that for the first time in NATO's history, they will activate and they will deploy elements of the NATO response force. It's a force with multinational elements, troops and other equipment that it will be deployed for the first time, which means that it's something that Jens Stoltenberg was saying during the press conference, that this is the first time the most severe situation in European security since the Second World War, which is very, very important. Of course, what is also very important to say here is that Jens Stoltenberg said that individual NATO members, NATO countries, will continue to offer to give weapons and air defense systems to support Ukraine. Of course, this is the only support that not NATO, but NATO members, individual members, NATO itself cannot do that, of course, but only individual members. And here we have to say that even today we heard the Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium, Sophie Wilmès, when entering the Foreign Affairs Council, she said also that she will look for this kind of opportunity to call this National Security Council in order to find ways to send weapons and equipment to Ukraine itself. But of course, Ukraine, this is the only thing that NATO members and not NATO itself can do for Ukraine. It can do a lot for defending its territory, NATO's territory, as Jens Stoltenberg said, every inch of NATO's territory, in order not only to reassure allies, but also to prevent any spillover.
So NATO defending its own territory, and it continues with that line. Now, we've also heard from the Russian Foreign Ministry, Effie, who have threatened detrimental military and political consequences for both Finland and Sweden if they join NATO. And they were, of course, at that meeting today. So what has been the reaction?
There was no official reaction. They don't want, of course, nobody here wants to really comment officially to any kind of threat for Russia. NATO is always very stable and firm to what it says. It's up to countries to decide their fate and their allies. And they, of course, they are ready to defend any partners, any members of NATO. So all these threats are just threats expected from Putin's side. They've seen how far Russia and Putin's Russia can go with Ukraine, so they are ready to defend and prepare to defend everybody. And of course they are still open and say that every country, included Ukraine, is ready and free to choose their allies and their own fate. And this, of course, is the same for Finland and Sweden, that are neutral for years.
OK, Effie Kutzer-Koster, thank you so much for updating us on the latest from NATO and from Brussels. Thank you so much. OK, well, we will take a short break, but still to come on Euronews, we're heading over to Matthew in the Cube.
Mariam, Russia's state communications watchdog said it is partially restricting Facebook. We'll tell you why after the break.
They say it's a new world. But what does a new world mean?
I dream of
new stories, new perspectives.
People say, oh, you're a pioneer.
New ways of seeing the world.
For me, it's just like freedom.
A new world starts with understanding.
Our world is evolving faster than ever before. In this Euronews debate, our experts will discuss how to successfully regenerate a town or region. Join me, Damon Embling, and our panellists live on Euronews.com.
Get all the latest on Euronews Now, coming up shortly.
Everything from Ukraine?
I'm not sure if it's everyone.
Welcome back to the programme. Now, Russia has said that it's limiting access to Facebook amid its attack on Ukraine. Let's now head over to Matthew in the Cube for more on this.
Well, Mariam, this was announced by Russia's state communications watchdog. Let me take you straight to the statement. They said they had taken action after the US tech giant had imposed limits on a number of Russian state media channels. Articles, photos and other pieces of content have been labelled as unreliable. This, of course, comes amid widespread coverage of Russia's attack on Ukraine. But as you can see here, the Russian state authorities said that they had taken this measure to protect Russian media outlets. And from Friday, Facebook would be partially restricted unless those limits on those Russian media channels were lifted. Now, another reason that you should note this is this comes, of course, amid a growing online movement in Russia. A number of younger citizens, as well as several well-known celebrities, have been sharing this hashtag, which literally translates #NoToWar. Many people expressing their condemnation of President Vladimir Putin and accusing him of warmongering amid this invasion of Ukraine. Other people on Facebook in Russia have been changing their avatars to either the Ukrainian flag or other symbols and graphics to show their support for Ukraine's freedom. Now, it's not the first time that Facebook or indeed any other social media channels have been limited in Russia. But Mariam, the timing, of course, this time is particularly significant. It's not exactly clear how much this restriction will affect Facebook in Russia. But once again, you see the Moscow and the Kremlin trying to control the narrative amid fighting on the ground in Ukraine and an online propaganda war as well.
Thank you for that update. Thank you so much. Now, the EU has agreed to, of course, put President Vladimir Putin and his Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on a sanctions list. It's the second package the bloc has announced following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But Brussels is facing criticism for not going far enough, and Italy is one member being singled out. Well, for more, let's now go over to Rome and speak to Georgia Orlandi. So, Georgia, we've got this latest sanctions package from the EU, but that SWIFT payment system, it's not included. Now, we do know, of course, that Italy was reported to have been one of the countries blocking it. Why has it been doing that?
Hi, Marianne. Well, yes, early reports suggested that Italy would be among those countries that would actually block those sanctions. But we just heard from Italy's Foreign Secretary Luigi Di Maio not that long ago. He said that Italy will be fully aligned with the rest of the EU, so won't block those sanctions. And this has now become official as Italy's government's main press office just confirmed that. Perhaps those early reports stemmed from the fact that, as we know, half of Italy's gas supply is supplied by Moscow. So if Moscow is going to cut that off, clearly there will be dire consequences both for Italy and Russia. We've seen what has happened in the past few weeks. Fears over a possible conflict already sent energy prices skyrocketing. We've seen markets being on the edge for weeks, with experts warning that an invasion or even sanctions could push actually Italy and Europe towards pose a supply crisis. We've seen that energy price hike that has already affected both households and businesses across the country, but also we know that back in February, Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi had a telephone conversation with Vladimir Putin, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and according to reports in the Italian media, Putin said that Russia will continue to ensure stable supplies of gas to Italy. But clearly, although Italy has been quite cautious about imposing those sanctions, Italy cannot act alone and will be fully aligned with the rest of the EU. Marianne?
You talk about being fully aligned with the rest of the EU, but what about the Italian government's position when it comes to Vladimir Putin himself?
Well, for the first time since the very beginning of this crisis, both yesterday and today, we heard from Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi, who took a very strong stance against Russia. He said, and I quote, that Italy demands that Russia unconditionally pull its forces back to internationally established borders. And he said that Italy, together with its Western partners, will ensure, will do everything necessary to restore Ukrainian sovereignty over its lands. It's something that he also repeated today. So that position has actually changed in the past few hours, and clearly Italy is well aware of the consequences also of those sanctions, going back to your questions earlier. But clearly, as Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi said, well, Italy will be acting together with the EU with regards to the next move. Marianne?
OK, Giorgio Lanti, thank you so much for that update from Italy. Thank you so much. OK, we will now take a very short break, but do stay with us. A lot more to come on Euronews Tonight.
This week on Euronews.
In this week's Real Economy, what's standing in the way of people with disabilities successfully entering the workplace in Europe?
I've been to Poland and Spain to meet two women who'll be telling me how they successfully entered the labour market.
But less than half of people with disabilities have a job. I'm asking the Commissioner for Equality what action's being taken this week on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Get all the latest on Euronews Now, coming up shortly.